influencing popular culture, politics, and everything in between. The local station takes you ringside as we discuss the crazy world that is professional wrestling. This is Going Ringside with The Local Station.
Hello, I'm Scott Johnson, and welcome to another episode of Going Ringside. So glad you could be with us. Kind of a serious topic today because we're talking about that guy right there and the company he used to own. We're talking about Vince McMahon, and we're talking about WWE. Specifically the lawsuit. This is one of many filings I've gotten out of federal court involving Vince McMahon and the allegations by the former employee Janel Grant, who has accused him of sex trafficking while she was an employee under his employ. Now, we've discussed this at length for the last year or so, all the details that have come up in this case, in this allegation against Vince McMahon, which he has adamantly denied. He and his lawyers have said he did nothing illegal, nothing wrong. However, this lawsuit, as we've reported, has been put on hold while the Department of Justice has taken up an investigation on Vince McMahon. Of course, WWE has been named in the same lawsuit, so it's kind of a big deal in the wrestling world. So I spoke with Kendra Lamy. She is the spokesperson for Janel Grant, Vince McMahon's accuser. We're going to speak to her in just one moment. They have a lot they want to say about this case. One thing they're asking for is that WWE release women from their NDAs, or non-disclosure agreements, so they can speak freely about what happened. But I asked them more questions beyond that. We talked to them about a lot of details, like who could theoretically be called to testify in a Vince McMahon trial. Vince McMahon, as we've documented here, has been a close ally of former President Donald Trump for decades. If he wins the election, what happens to the DOJ investigation? These are all topics we talk about in this groundbreaking interview. A little later on, we will have a response from Vince McMahon that I will have for you. And we will also hear from a veteran defense lawyer, not affiliated with this case, and a crime analyst, a veteran police detective, also not affiliated with this case, to help us break down what is going on with both the Department of Justice and, in this case, filed by Janel Grant, and what could come out of it if something happens with the DOJ or does not. How is Grant's case impacted? So let's start the show right now. Here is my interview with Kendra Lamy. She's a former spokesperson for President Biden back when he was vice president, and now she is a spokesperson for Janel Grant in this mammoth lawsuit against the man who used to run WWE, that guy right there, Vince McMahon. Well, we are joined right now by Kendra Lamy, the spokesperson for Janel Grant in this case involving Vince McMahon and WWE. Kendra, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you covering this topic.
Well, talk to me kind of where this case is right now. This has been obviously in the news for, a good year or so. Talk to me about where you guys are with respect to this litigation.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So right now, the federal government has asked Ms. Grant and her attorneys to basically hang tight. They issued what's called a stay on her civil case against Vince McMahon and WWE. So we are doing that. Her civil case is basically just hanging out until a judge lifts that order for all intents and purposes, and then she's able to move forward with that case. In the meantime, the feds, which I'm sure your viewers have been following along and have seen, are doing an investigation themselves into Mr. McMahon. And so we are waiting to see, where that investigation goes. And in the meantime, she's going to continue to keep, her voice out there in the way that she can.
Have you or your client, Ms. Grant, been involved in this DOJ investigation? Can you speak to that at all?
Unfortunately, I can't speak to that in any way, shape, or form, but she would love all proceedings to move quickly and as expeditiously as possible.
Well, in the last couple of weeks, there's obviously Mr. McMahon has been in the headlines because of the Netflix docuseries, which has been, highly publicized. Has your team or Ms. Grant reviewed that? Any thoughts on that at this point?
I definitely watched it, and I have to say nothing that I saw was remotely troubling. Remotely surprising. It was very troubling. If you have read Ms. Grant's complaint, you will understand the atrocities that she experienced at the hands of Vince McMahon. She was essentially human trafficked. And so the fact that they covered, part of what happened and the case in the beginning and in the end of the documentary is an important piece. But it's only part of it, right? And I urge all of your viewers to go and read the full complaint, because I think some of the things that she experienced is sort of unfathomable.
Mr. McMahon and his attorneys have denied any wrongdoing in this pretty vociferously for the last year, and they have characterized Ms. Grant in a certain way. Your response to their denial?
I mean, no one in any right mind could remotely think that what she experienced was consensual in any way, shape, or form. She was human trafficked, which to your viewers means that she was basically taken from one place and put in another place to do things that are pretty unspeakable. And so if anyone thinks that is consensual, the stuff that she had to do and was forced to do basically out of fear for her life, I think you can't possibly question that.
One thing, this has not just been Vince McMahon named here, it's also been WWE as a corporation. And one thing you've been pretty outspoken about, as has your team, is the non-disclosure agreements that many very high-profile WWE talents you're alleging have signed, and you would like WWE to release them. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think part of the reason why Ms. Grant came forward in the way that she did is she doesn't want anybody else to experience what she experienced again. And part of that means changing the broader culture, changing what happens inside an organization for the long haul. We know, for instance, according to the Wall Street Journal, that there were at least 4 other NDA women who signed NDAs with the WWE, totaling $12 million total. We have heard anecdotally and through calls to Ms. Grant's legal team that there are many, many more out there who have signed non-disclosure agreements with WWE, which basically says they can't talk about their experience that they experienced there. We're not talking about trade secrets. We're not talking about business secrets. We're talking about sexual assault. We're talking about sexual harassment in the workplace. And so what she would like is for these women to be able to speak freely about their experiences. Right now, they're not able to do so, which is what a non-disclosure agreement says and does. And, if the WWE has nothing to hide, then let all these people speak about what happened to them. Let's show that they are turning the page, that there is a new era at the WWE, that they're going to be more transparent about.
I want to ask about that because, WWE has essentially, as far as I can tell, severed all ties with McMahon, with his family. Vince, I believe, unloaded most of his stock. They have separated themselves from him.
They have, but I know that there are still people that work within the organization at WWE that were around at the time when Miss Grant was there. And so, we can't say for certain, but we know that there's probably some things that they themselves watched or they know. And so if there's no problem, then open it up and let everybody sort of speak freely about their experiences there.
If this goes to trial after the DOJ investigation, we can't say where it will end. Could we see some high-profile names brought into this case? Called to the stand?
We will see. We're a long time away from that. The stay on her case, on her civil case, is up in December, with the potential option for an extension from there. And so, I think, unfortunately, we're a little ways away from even anything moving forward. So, at this point, I'm not going to, hypothetically talk about that.
I do want to ask about one aspect of this case. Vince McMahon is an extremely high-profile person in this case, obviously. He's very high-profile, not only for wrestling, but the McMahon family has been very close to politics. His wife, I believe estranged wife, Linda, part of the Trump administration, the McMahon's been close to the Trump campaign for years. You yourself have said you were a former spokesperson for Vice President Biden. Has there been any politics here, or do you think this is a straight criminal case?
There's no politics at play here. This is a straight case where a woman was human trafficked. That is exactly what this is. I've worked with a lot of survivors over the years. I've represented Harvey Weinstein actresses. I've represented Epstein survivors. This is sort of what I do. There is no politics at play. This is exactly what it is, which was human trafficking.
And I do need to just ask, because this is a DOJ investigation, federal government involved. It's possible if the election goes one way, we could have someone else in charge. Are you concerned Vince McMahon would be pardoned or a DOJ investigation dropped if Donald Trump is elected?
I think that hopefully the facts will be followed and that the law will be followed and that he will be held accountable.
And as far as Ms. Grant, how is she doing? This has been an arduous year for her. I'm certain her name, in the public eye, which she's probably never dealt with before, certainly at this magnitude. How is your client doing at this point?
It has been really rough for her. She's sort of living in agony every day. She's still dealing with the stress and the post-traumatic stress of what she experienced. It's an emotional roller coaster, but she's very much looking forward to this case moving forward and the proceedings moving forward so that she can move on with her life and there can be some accountability.
And lastly, has it been frustrating for her to see the statements from the McMahon camp? When they come out here and there, he has not spoken on camera yet, but they're denying it. That's got to be hard. As you say, she is a victim here, and to see that.
I have no doubt in my mind that she is living each and every day and reading those statements and that is true. But I think she knows what is true and what happened to her. And so she is just looking forward to her day in court so she can hold him accountable.
Kendra Barkov Lamy, spokesperson for Janel Grant, we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I appreciate Ms. Lamy sitting down with me to talk about where the case is right now. But, Vince McMahon and his lawyers have said he did nothing wrong, nothing illegal throughout all of this. WWE is their cooperative, and they've done their own investigations. I got to do that again. Redo 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, Vince McMahon throughout all this has said he did nothing wrong, as have his lawyers. They haven't said anything on camera, but they've adamantly denied and said they will fight this in court. WWE has released its own statements, done its own, investigations into what happened. As we've talked about, Vince McMahon sold off all his shares. He is in no way affiliated with WWE. None of his biological family members anymore are affiliated with WWE. The only one related to it would be his son-in-law, Triple H, who's still kind of running the show over at WWE. But McMahon has released some statements. I want to put it on the screen now. This is one statement that Vince McMahon has put out there regarding what Janel Grant has said. He says her lawsuit is replete with lies, obscene, made-up instances that never occurred, and is a vindictive distortion of the truth. I intend to vigorously defend against these baseless accusations and look forward to clearing my name. That was one of the previous statements that McMahon has put out there. There's been a lot of back and forth, and we can come back on camera here, over the last year, because this is an ongoing, evolving story, starting with the lawsuit, going to the DOJ investigation. So I wanted to bring two experts in to help us break down what will happen here. One is a veteran defense lawyer, handled a lot of high-profile cases down here in Florida, where I'm at, G. Nichols. The other is a guy named Tom Hackney. He's a former head of detectives for a very large police agency in Jacksonville, and he is now a crime analyst working in Florida to help us kind of break down, A, what's happening with the DOJ investigation, and B, how does this play into this lawsuit that Janel Grant has filed, which is on hold for now because the judge has put a stay on it until, I think she said December, until it can start up again because of the DOJ investigation. So here's my interview with a veteran defense lawyer not affiliated with this case and a longtime retired police detective also not affiliated with this case. Here it is. And now we are joined by two experts who could kind of weigh in here. First, we are joined by G. Nichols, a veteran defense lawyer in Florida with the Nichols and Pina law firm, as well as Tom Hackney, a retired police detective and crime analyst based down here in Florida. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely, Scott. Happy to be here.
Gene, I want to start with you. Talk to me right now. One of the things that the plaintiff's spokesperson has brought up is they would like WWE to release other talent, we're assuming females, who are under non-disclosure agreements or NDAs from this agreement. Do they really have a leg to stand on? Do you think they'll be successful here?
Well, so Scott, what we have seen across the country in the last several years is states have started to kind of back off on NDA agreements and not make them as powerful as they have been in the past to allow people to be able to step away from these sort of agreements. That being said, it's going to be difficult. I do not anticipate these individuals being released from anything. Obviously, if they're concerned that these individuals have anything negative to say, and typically you don't have somebody sign an NDA unless they're going to have something bad to say. I don't anticipate just a voluntary agreement to say, no, y'all can say whatever you want, even though we've given you all of this money in order to have this agreement. So as of now, I do expect them to be in place. I do expect them to stay in place, and I don't anticipate anybody to violate them, recognizing that they would face civil consequences, lawsuits, if they did.
Tom, on the Department of Justice investigation, this was announced about 4 months ago or so. We haven't really heard much. I mean, what is DOJ doing? Are they interviewing other women? Are they, digging into WWE? I mean, what goes on in these behind-the-scenes investigations that we really don't hear much about publicly?
Yeah, from a federal side, these investigators are very thorough in what they do and methodical, and it does take some time. What we just talked about, the NDAs, that may be part of it, where they're working through that to try to talk to more people. People are reluctant. They call it hush money for a reason, so they're quiet. So, there's all that goes on. There's just kind of bricks in that wall that they have to work through to find more people. That's where an investigation like this really hinges. Is you've got kind of a he said, she said, and you want more than that from an investigative standpoint to take to trial. So you want to find more victims. You want to find more people that can corroborate what a victim is saying. So there's a lot of legwork that's going on behind the scenes here. And since May, it seems like a long time, but with a high profile case like this, it's kind of what you might expect.
And Tom, continuing on that, McMahon has claimed, he's not guilty of any of these charges, and he probably has the best lawyers money can buy. But as far as what the feds will do if they did pursue charges, does a grand jury get impaneled and we'll hear about an indictment at some point? Is that historically what would happen?
Yeah, historically speaking, that's what's going to happen. So they're building their case now. They'll reach a point where they either have enough or don't have enough. Probably consider that federal grand jury, take that to that federal grand jury, do an indictment, whether sealed or unsealed, and work forward from there. So that may all be what's going on here, and you may not hear about the next step until the indictment is unsealed and they're making an arrest in this case. Or depending on
Tom, and Scott, I just sorry to interrupt you, but just to carry with what Tom had to say, because I agree with him 100%. But one of the things that is probably happening right now is each one of those employees who has an NDA may be in front of a grand jury. And if they're in front of a grand jury under subpoena, they're testifying, and they're not walking in there saying, I have a piece of paper that says that I'm not allowed to say anything. They've got a federal judge saying, tell us what happened. And so that's
to drill down on that, Gene. So we're talking probably very public, very high profile people in the wrestling world. The feds can compel them to talk to them, even though they have this NDA. They may not be public, but they're talking privately.
Absolutely. And I think Tom obviously has probably dealt with this before. When the federal government is going to subpoena you and you're coming in, and whether it's a state government or federal government, you're coming in front of a grand jury, that judge who is sitting on that grand jury is going to trump that NDA. And most of those agreements will say, when there's been some form of non-disclosure, or you have an agreement in a civil case and everybody's agreed to confidentiality, except when compelled by a court. So what the lawyers right now are waiting for is, are these individuals, are these people who they think have these NDAs and are potentially victims of crimes, are they being brought in front of a judge? Are they being sworn to tell the truth? And the NDA is out the window. And once that testimony potentially comes out, then once again, the plaintiffs have gotten what they want in their civil case, that they've been able to trump these NDAs by what happened in the federal criminal prosecution.
And Gene, I want to ask you if this does go to a civil case which Janel Grant has filed, and it's put on hold. But if that eventually gets back in the process again, and this goes to a courtroom, the witness stand, could we see some very high-profile witnesses being subpoenaed and forced to testify in a McMahon trial?
There's no question you're going to see that. Now, what you'll probably see is some of it unfold first in the criminal case, but there's no question that I would expect a plaintiff in this case to put subpoenas out for everybody, including those folks who have testified in front of the grand jury. Now, they're not going to be allowed to talk about it. So we're not going to have anybody just come out and say, I was in front of the grand jury, I admitted to this, or I admitted to that. But once a criminal prosecution begins, if it does, then we start to see the unsealing of testimony.
And these are, and Gene, to interrupt, I mean, this is unprecedented because the names here could be extraordinarily high-profile individuals.
Well, there's no question. These are individuals who you know, we all will know. We have all known from history who has seen what, when, and how. And so, yes, there's no question that that's why I think this is taking so long, because you have to imagine all these individuals, and Tom talked so well about how long this is taking. Each one of these individuals, high-profile individuals, they all have lawyers, and they all have lawyers who are talking to the Department of Justice before they ever walk in front of a grand jury and before they ever have any conversations. So the federal government is going to meet with all of these individuals and their lawyers before they ever get in front of a grand jury to figure out exactly what they're going to say. And that is a slow process. But yes, you can expect everybody who we have known over the last couple of decades who've been involved in this organization to be a part of this case.
And Tom, as far as, you know, we're talking about the possibility of an indictment. I mean, it's very possible the DOJ could say, we found no criminal acts here. I mean, that's possible too. How does that work?
So, you know, you've got this very, very high profile individual who's out there, bags of money to throw at this, to fight this. And, you know, maybe that's where it goes. Maybe, you know, you compel somebody to go sit in front of a grand jury and you compel them to tell the truth. And just depends on what has happened behind the scenes, behind those doors, as to how much truth they end up telling. You know, that puts them in, and Gene can speak to this, but puts them in some legal hot water there potentially. But, you know, this is everybody around this are names that people know. People who are watching this are going to be like, oh yeah, I know every name that could possibly be involved with this. And if the DOJ comes up with a, you know, kind of a shrug your shoulder and says, we've got no case, I don't think that would really surprise any of our viewers to see, hey, wait a minute. It doesn't shock me that this has gone this way. But on the other hand, I think they would equally be shocked to see Vince McMahon in handcuffs.
Gene, final question. Vince McMahon has beaten the system a lot over the decades. There was a steroid scandal in the 90s. He beat the federal government then, and there's been other stuff over the years. I mean, he's skilled in the art of, you know, battling in the legal system. But we haven't heard from him. Historically, Vince has always been a guy not afraid to be in front of the cameras or speak his mind. This time we haven't heard much. We've gotten statements. Lawyers have released statements. Are you surprised in this case McMahon is not in front of the cameras?
I'm not surprised at all. While he may have an ego the size of the room that I'm in right now, he obviously has highly competent counsel who are absolutely going to tell him he is not saying a word. And
I'm sorry, Gene, I don't want to end this and forget to ask the important question about politics. And I asked their counsel about this, the spokesperson, if there's a change in Washington, D.C., the McMahon family has been very close to the Trump family for decades. If there's a change in Washington, could this DOJ investigation just go away?
I would be very surprised without a very public proclamation from a incoming Trump White House. It's not anything that we could just wash away and nobody's going to speak about it. You can't just stop a DOJ investigation and then not talk about it. So there is no question that there may be waiting for that. But that being said, this is not an investigation that anybody could just sweep under the rug, no matter who the president is.
Tom Hackney, Gene Nichols, both of you gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Scott.
So that's kind of where we're at right now. I do want to put out this message to both Vince McMahon, any of your attorneys, anyone with WWE. I reached out to all the parties. They have not returned my calls at this point. but you're welcome to respond anytime. We'll put it out here on Going Ringside, and you're welcome to come on the show anytime if you would love to speak. For now, though, we're going to end it here, and we will see you back here next time on Going Ringside.
This has been Going Ringside with The Local Station, brought to you every Wednesday on your favorite podcast player, on News4Jax Plus, as well as the News4Jax YouTube channel.